they are behind this initiative, and they are saying Hamas has no right to hold weapons, Hamas must be disarmed, Hamas should not govern the Gaza Strip, and Hamas must return all of the hostages. They're also asking, of course, demanding that Israel withdraw from the Gaza Strip and that there will be a pathway to a Palestinian state. And, for most people who are normal and not consumed by Jew hatred and this feverish anger and hatred towards those annoying Jews who have their homeland in Israel, for most people who are sane, that makes sense.
Don't you find it strange that some of the people who were shouting genocide in Gaza the loudest are now some of the biggest opponents of the deal that was brokered by President Donald Trump? Because it means that maybe perhaps Hamas will actually lose? Well, one of those people is the pro-Hezbollah, pro-Hamas, pro-Iran, pro-Venezuela, pro-Syria, anti-America, Abby Martin, taking on Jonathan Conricus on Piers Morgan. Where else? Let's take a look.
Abby Martin, where are you with this deal? Do you believe this deal is workable, that it can actually be the start of lasting peace?
Well, of course, I welcome an end to the unrelenting slaughter and bloodletting for the past 2 years. There's been hundreds of October 7ths that have happened in Gaza. Of course, I welcome the cessation of massacres. The bare minimum demand for the last 2 years has been a ceasefire. So, of course, I welcome that. I think it's a big gamble by Hamas. I mean, this entire negotiations is basically putting Palestinians the barrel of a gun to their head and saying, subject, surrender, or die. First of all, no Palestinians were at the negotiating table. It was Gulf client states speaking on their behalf, Netanyahu and Kushner, who's personally invested in the settlement process. The whole gamble of releasing all the remaining hostages dead and alive within a 72-hour window is logistically insane. And of course, it's basically acting in good faith from the Israeli government, a pathologically lying, serial-killing state. Why should we believe anything that they say? They're saying they're not going to release any of the hostages, the 1,700 Palestinians they've been holding after October 7th, many
Terrorists, Abby. Prisoners, not hostages. There's a difference.
women and children. Aside from that, they're talking about putting in a technocratic governing body by the likes of Tony Blair. I mean, this is basically cementing the subjugation of Palestinians, Piers. And I think the most cartoonish thing of all is the demand for full demilitarization of Hamas and other armed factions. I mean, basically what that is saying is that the precursor and justification for genocide is the notion of armed resistance. Jonathan, let me finish. The notion of armed resistance, which is a legally enshrined right in international law. That is not a justification or precursor for genocide. In what reality are we living in that the victims of a genocide are being asked to make concessions to the people committing genocide against them? If you do not agree at this point, 2 years in, that the state that needs to be demilitarized and de-radicalized, frankly, is not the state committing genocide, then you're part of the problem.
Okay, but on that last point, before I go to Jonathan, why should a group, Hamas, who perpetrated one of the worst terror attacks of modern times, why should they be entitled to any power at the end of all this? Why should they not demilitarize? Why should they not have all their arms taken away as part of a deal? I don't really understand the logic there. I mean, you can have your view about the Israeli government and the way the IDF has conducted this war, but why should Hamas have any rights to anything, frankly?
Well, Hamas already has said many, many times that they would completely relinquish governing authority. They have already said that they
But why should they keep their arms, though?
Gaza
That's the
Strip.
point.
That's not enough.
But why keep their arms?
Wait, why would they give up their arms without, hold on, why would they give up their arms without any sort of assurance for national statehood or sovereignty? Why would they do that, Piers? Why would you give up a right, a legally enshrined right to armed resistance to an illegal besiegement and occupation without any sort of assurances or promises of statehood?
Well, again, I'll come to Jonathan, and I will come to you, Jonathan, but I would argue that when you commit a terrorist act of that magnitude, then you abrogate all your rights to demand anything. And the Israeli government position...
Okay, so why is the logic not applied to the IDF?
Well, I'll come to Jonathan for that question in a moment, but I'm just curious why you would think that Hamas has any rights about any of this. I mean, surely when you do what they did on October the 7th 2 years ago, in that moment, you surrender your right to anything. You can ask for it, but you don't have any rights left. I mean, you're basically saying, we are a despicable terror group. we're committing this outrage
And
we're going to kidnap and kill and maim and do all the rest of it. But at the end of it, we want rights to demand things. That's not really how it works with terror groups.
well, that's exactly what Israel's doing. For the last 2 years, we've been seeing the most bloody genocide on steroids. This is Israel for who it is. This is their true nature and character. So why on earth do they get the right to make concessions? They are a rogue maniac state, killing all of their neighbors, bombing all of their neighbors. They need to be stopped. They need to be stopped. Why do they have any rights to demand concessions for the victims of the genocide that they're perpetrating, Piers?
Okay.
Why?
All right. Well, let me ask Jonathan, why?
Is that really the question, Piers, that you're asking me?
Well, I think it's an interesting flip question to the one I asked, which I didn't really get a satisfactory response to, which is that actually, to me, Hamas have no right to demand anything here. And clearly, the Netanyahu government position is that we will carry on pulverizing Gaza until the last Hamas terrorist is left dead in the ground, as long as that takes. And everybody is intent on trying to stop that happening because of the collateral damage to so many civilians and so much property and so on. But of course, the flip side is the argument comes back, well, prior to October the 7th, and since October the 7th in particular, the Israeli government, many people on the Palestinian side believe, have behaved like a rogue terror state themselves. So what right do they have to determine what happens here afterwards?
Yeah, I regret the parity. I think it's a totally false, dishonest, actually it's an absurd parity that is being made here. And I think it's very interesting to hear that, you know, even countries like Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, Pakistan, and a few other Muslim majority countries who have no long record of loving Israel or publishing positive statements or things that can be aligned with Israeli security interests, they are behind this initiative, and they are saying Hamas has no right to hold weapons, Hamas must be disarmed, Hamas should not govern the Gaza Strip, and Hamas must return all of the hostages. They're also asking, of course, demanding that Israel withdraw from the Gaza Strip and that there will be a pathway to a Palestinian state. And, you know, for most people who are normal and not consumed by Jew hatred and this feverish anger and hatred towards those annoying Jews who have their homeland in Israel, for most people who are sane, that makes sense. And it makes sense for Israel to actually dictate the terms against Hamas. It makes sense for Israel to defend itself, not only against October 7, but against an organization that has both written and said multiple times before October 7, during and after October 7, that it is their outspoken goal and intention to annihilate the Jewish state. So for me, there's really no question what needs to happen here. This war cannot and must not end without a defeated Hamas, without Hamas that is completely dismantled of its military capabilities, and without a fresh start for people in Gaza. And I think that those are the very basic prerequisites. We'll have to see now if Hamas, how clever they'll be able to be. And I think they maneuvered diplomatically pretty well. They said that they're going to return hostages. Teams are now in place in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, and they're going to start discussing the details. But the Israeli and American, and actually Qatari condition is first hand over all the hostages, dead and murdered, and then we start negotiating on all of the long and very substantial list of the 21 points that remain. I hope that Hamas will do it. I hope that Hamas will be true to their words for once. I hope that they will return the hostages, those that they murdered and those that are still in captivity more than 2 years, suffering, starving, abused and everything. And I hope that they will be returned to their families. And then we can start looking at the withdrawal of Israeli forces, stopping military operations, and perhaps building a different Gaza. If you ask me if that's going to happen, what the chances are, we unfortunately have our experience, and we know that Hamas, they lie, they are deceitful, they're extremely cruel, and they will do everything they can to stay in power at the expense of the population in Gaza, at the expense of Palestinians. But I hope that for once in their short history, Hamas will do what's good for Gazans and not for the Muslim Brotherhood and not for Hamas itself. But we'll have to wait and see.
Abby, you were laughing a little inappropriately as he was talking about Hamas's need to release the hostages. Why would that be something that makes you laugh? I mean, surely that should be a prerequisite.
Oh, no, I wasn't laughing at that. No, look, of course I want all hostages, both Palestinian and Israeli hostages, to be released. I wasn't laughing at that. I was laughing at the audacity of Jonathan to just gaslight and lie and project everything that Israelis are doing onto Hamas and onto Palestinians. The audacity to look at Gaza today, which is completely demolished. We just saw the finance minister saying the demolition's done. Now the real estate bonanza begins. Netanyahu has said, bragging over and over again, we're not going to withdraw. You think we're going to withdraw? It's a joke, Jonathan. The world knows you are lying. You have lost the plot. You know who can't come home? The 17,000 children that Israelis have slaughtered. So all of this is it's just absolutely insane that 2 years into this, we all know that you're committing genocide. The only people who won't accept that it's a genocide are Israelis. And you know what? I think that you know it's a genocide, Jonathan. I think you just support it. You want the genocide.
Abby, let me just jump in there. Abby, on this issue of genocide, you are aware that no country has ever been found guilty of actual genocide, are you?
What point is this question?
That even in Rwanda,
what is the point of that question? We know what
it was determined that the legal threshold for
every
a genocide
single
was not
genocide
met.
scholar, even though, okay, so
my point is that
you're looking at Gaza today and you're saying that you've agreed that it's a genocide, Piers.
No,
What is
I've
the
never
point of this
agreed
question?
that. I've said that I believe what has been going on.
Okay, sure.
No, because
Sure.
simply for the reason I've just stated, there has never been a legally determined genocide declared.
Okay,
anywhere
let's get
in
him
the
to
world.
court. Let's go to court with Israel.
That's
okay,
what
let's
I think.
Let's see the evidence.
That's what I think
bare.
would be sensible, right? I think it would be sensible to do that and actually get a legal ruling about whether it constitutes genocide. I believe the Israeli
100%.
government.
Unfortunately,
I would
it's being
welcome that, Piers,
completed.
by the way.
And Jonathan and I have
I would
discussed this.
welcome that.
I just think that it gets thrown around all the time, and people get attacked for not saying it's a genocide. I get stopped by people in the street, call it a genocide. To me, what has gone on has become an increasingly massively disproportionate response to the terror attack 2 years ago.
92% civilians killed. 92% civilians have been killed, Piers. That
Well,
is
we don't know the
unfortunate.
No, that's not true, Abby. That's not true. We have around 20, 25, or 30,000 Hamas fighters, something between 20 to 30,000 Hamas fighters who were killed. And then we have around 67,000 casualties. So we're talking about 1-to-1 or one combatant to 2 civilians who were killed, perhaps. And of course, we're not taking into account the fact that you have natural deaths from old age, which should be about 6,000 or 7,000 people within a 2-year frame. We have the graphs that show a huge increase in the deaths among fighting age men in the ages bracket of 20, 30, and 40. And then, of course, just the number of people killed in Gaza, that's about 1.7% of the population. In Armenia, it was over 50%, in Rwanda, 80%. In the Holocaust, also around that, 70, 80%. So it's nothing like any genocide that's ever happened before. But she doesn't care about any of that now, does she?
Well, again,
any modern conflict.
well, we don't know the exact
That's
numbers.
false.
The numbers that I've read are that
We do.
approaching 25 to 30,000 of the 60 or so thousand who've been killed are Hamas. But here's my point about that. We don't actually know, because actually the refusal by the Israeli government, and Jonathan, I know, agrees with me on this point, the refusal to allow international journalists into Gaza to verify this stuff is one of the biggest problems of this war. We just don't know what these numbers are. And it's an ongoing running sore that journalists can't do their job and get to the truth. But Jonathan, on this...
Piers, I think we should address something, on the topic of numbers and, these big, important, historically loaded terms like genocide, like apartheid, like famine. Let's revisit, and I think that there's people who have been claiming and saying that there's famine in Gaza. Famine was declared by the IPC, I believe, on August 22nd. Now, A friend of mine has done the numbers on it, and I think it's important to be specific here because there are definitions, and when you say famine, that means something. When a UN organization claims that there's famine somewhere, that's supposed to be backed up by data and by reality. Now, according to the numbers and statistics and the globally accustomed numbers of the IPC, which they follow, they issued a declaration that on August 22nd, there's famine in certain parts of Gaza. By their own numbers of level 4 and 5, emergency and famine, there should have been 9,500 dead Palestinians by malnutrition, not natural deaths, not combat, not pre-existing conditions, 9,500 dead Palestinians since August 22nd. You know how many there really have been? According to Hamas numbers, 191. That's 98% off. Now, I challenge you and I challenge everybody who have been screaming and were part of the starvation campaign and the famine, all of the other nonsense that we heard with UN regalia attached to it. At the end of the day, it's a fake. It's lies. It is not supported by reality. It's make-believe, and it is propaganda against Israel that useful idiots who have no bearing on the situation on the ground are parroting just because it is a weapon
But you wouldn't
against
dispute,
Israel.
Jonathan.
It is untrue.
But
it is not
Jonathan,
factual.
Okay,
we can see the photos, right?
Hang on, but Jonathan, you wouldn't dispute that there was a near 3-month blockade of substantial amounts of food and aid. I mean, that was indisputable. That happened.
There were indeed months where not a lot was coming in, yes.
Right. But that's
true. But the important part, Piers, but the important part is what was the result? The important part is, okay, that was done by Israel and it was said by Israeli leadership. It was challenged by the defense establishment, and there were a lot of internal discussions. But at the end of the day, when UN-affiliated organizations declared famine, and every journalist, editor, media personality, and talking heads repeated that as if that was gospel, nobody looks at the numbers. And even today, a month and a half after that, is anybody held accountable for these libellous, false, grotesque claims?
Well, why
Isn't
don't we,
it supposed to mean something
why
when
don't we
you
agree?
say
Why
that
don't we
there's a
agree?
famine
Okay,
and
so why don't
almost
we?
nobody's
Abby, I will
died?
come to you. So why don't we agree? Rather like with genocide, right? I have believed that the rhetoric coming out of Smodrich and Ben-Gvir in particular has made it clear there's been a policy by large sections of this government of ethnic cleansing. They would like to see all the Palestinians gone from Gaza and preferably the West Bank too. Thankfully, in this new plan, that is no longer apparently something that will be sustained by the American government, which means it probably won't happen. But let's not pretend they weren't talking about that openly. And in relation to famine, okay, let's just say there was a deliberate policy for nearly 12 weeks of starving Palestinians, and that some of them starved to death. I mean,
there wasn't a policy of starving Palestinians. There was a policy of not providing the
in other words, I think
Piers,
these words,
Piers,
in a way...
We've spoken about this.
But hang on,
Piers,
let me finish.
We have spoken about this. But you've addressed this, really, and we've spoken about it in the past. There was indeed an Israeli policy. And by the way, I reject and I criticize and I do not accept the statements made by Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. I think that they are disgusting. I think that they are not representative of Israel. I think that they are fringe. I know we've had this discussion before. He's a minister and cabinet, etc. But I think that they do not represent the majority of Israel. And most importantly, they are not implemented on the ground by the IDF. And amongst the three of us, actually the one who knows what the IDF is doing and what the IDF isn't doing and what goes on in internal deliberations in Israel, I actually have access to that, and I can say, and that's one of the reasons why I am here and I speak about it publicly, is yes, there have been horrible, unethical calls by Israeli ministers that should be condemned. I condemn it. Most Israelis do, and they do not reflect what Israelis believe should be done. Is there a will for revenge against Palestinians for what they have been doing and what they did on October 7? Definitely yes. But that is not what the IDF has been doing. The IDF has been fighting Hamas, and they have been applying military force proportionately according to military necessity against military targets.
All right,
that is what the IDF has been doing.
Okay.
And if we're honest, last sentence, yes, I know I'm speaking longly, last sentence, Israel is the only country that has been forced to provide food and fuel to its enemy. If you can give me any other example in modern history of a combating side that is forced to feed.
It's the law. When you're illegally besieging
no, it's not the law. It's not the law that you feed your enemy.
Right. Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
No, it is not the law. It is not the law. It is not the law.
Hang on. I'll let Jonathan, you have a good long stretch
Jonathan,
there.
you've been talking
Let
endlessly.
Abby now respond without interrupting her. Abby.
I haven't
Jonathan,
interrupted
first
at
of all,
just to be clear.
Okay, of course, because you've just been droning on and on with the most outrageous propaganda possible, basically saying, oh, they say that this many kids died of starvation, but really, that's a lie. We've seen the photos, Jonathan. It's skin and bones. It's like concentration camp victims.
Those photos were of people who had pre-existing conditions. Why are you filming someone who has something like cerebral palsy or cystic fibrosis as a starving child if starvation is so prevalent? And all the major media outlets, the New York Times and the others, BBC, had to issue an apology for the fact that they misrepresented what's going on by putting on a picture who has a pre-existing condition and presenting his condition as being the result of starvation. And of course, then there was a picture of that kid's brother being fat and healthy, showing that it was complete fake. So the pictures actually don't support what you're saying, Abby.
Coming out of the Holocaust. Do you know that we see this? I know that Israel's like to control the narrative with the billions of dollars with Hasbro propaganda, but we see the photos of starving children. We see doctors' testimonies saying baby formula was seized out of their bags. Baby formula. Why are you punishing babies? We know what the situation on the ground. Peanut butter was told to doctors that it was a luxury and stolen out of their bags, Jonathan. For the last 2 years, we've been told, not even talking about the siege before where calories were counted, given to Palestinians before October 7th, but just since October 7th, we've been told that there's no siege, there's no famine, that aid is not being prevented from being delivered, right? Well, we just saw an entire naval fleet blockade, committed an act of piracy and kidnapping of 500 activists illegally in international waters that were trying to bring baby formula and food to starving Palestinians. We've seen a
piracy against Greta Thunberg. Oh my God.
Mercenary force unload a barrage of bullets and kill more Palestinians begging for bread than civilians died on October 7th. So while people like you, these hand-picked spokespeople with American or Swedish accents, come and speak to Western audiences and placate us and tell us lies, we know what Israeli society thinks and believes, Jonathan. We see the news. I see Israeli Channel 12. I see the IDF reports. Of course I do. I see them coming out saying, guess what? Everyone left in Gaza City, the 250,000 people left, are going to be treated as terrorists and killed. Jonathan, I just let you speak forever. Jonathan, let me finish. Jonathan, let me finish.
So either stop saying my name.
You will be remembered no differently than the officers of the Third Reich. You will be remembered no differently than the officers of the Third Reich. You will be remembered in the dustbin of history.
I know you rehearsed that line.
Oh, come
I'm sure you
on,
rehearsed
man.
that line, but it's really pitiful. Come on, you can do better. You're a smart woman. You can do better. You've written books. You've narrated movies. You could do better. And I'm a bit insulted that that is what you've come up with against me. Really?
Well, what's your response to the rest of what I said, Jonathan? So you don't want to be compared to a Nazi officer.
I'll gladly tell
Why
you.
would you compare
in the beginning?
Abby, let me just jump in there.
I mean, you're so out of bounds.
Hang on, Jonathan. Abby, out of interest, why would you think that anybody watching this, when they hear you tell a Jewish man that he's basically a Nazi,
the grandchild of a Holocaust survivor, by the way, whose grandfather's family was murdered.
That is a winning point to make. Why would you not think in that moment, a lot of viewers go, what the hell are you talking about? Why would you be so offensive?
Well, it's not offensive at all. It's not offensive at all. If you want to not be compared to Nazis, stop acting like Nazis. It's very simple. Stop doing what Nazis did and stop treating Palestinians like Jews in concentration camps, Jonathan.
You are in your little eco bubble. You're so. I think you're consumed by hatred.
No, you are, my friend. The world has woken up, my friend. The world has woken up. No one believes your lies anymore.
No, it hasn't.
You're pathetic.
And I don't think that we're friends.
Propagandist.
I don't think that we're friends.
You're an absolutely pathetic propagandist,
not at all.
and no one believes you.
When you in the beginning, when Piers gave you a long lifeline.
Israel's on a shelf life, my friend. Zionism has a shelf life.
And he asked you, why is Hamas Why does Hamas have your legitimacy in your eyes? Why should Hamas even hold weapons? And you fumbled and stumbled, and you couldn't bring yourself to say, well, actually, no, Hamas shouldn't have weapons because they're bloody heinous terrorists. That's the response that I would,
I think
it makes
Israel
sense for a
should be
person like you to say.
demilitarized, Jonathan.
But you couldn't bring yourself to say it.
Israel
Why? Because
should
you
be
sympathize with
demilitarized.
them.
Of course, I'm not
because
going to
you
say
believe
it.
that their resistance is legitimate. You believe, I'm sure, that Israel is very annoying and that we shouldn't
I believe in the
exist
law,
where we
Jonathan.
are. I've
I
seen your
believe in the
movies.
law.
Yeah, no, you don't believe in the law. You don't believe in the law. You
Yeah, I
believe that we
do.
don't have a right to
I
exist
do.
in our homeland.
I want
I've seen
Israel
your
to-
movies.
I
I've
want
read
Israel
some
to
parts
be-
of your books.
All right.
I've seen what you've done in Gaza. You've been
Okay.
propagating for Hamas.
Israel should
That's
follow
what
the
you've
law,
been doing.
Piers. Very
And you
simple.
couldn't
The
even
solution
bring
is
yourself
Israel
to
to
say,
follow the law.
I think
you couldn't
everybody,
even bring yourself
everybody
to say
should follow the
Hamas
law.
shouldn't have weapons.
Everyone should follow the law. I've got to leave it
Everyone
there.
should follow the law.
We've run out of time, but I thank you both very much. Thank you.
My goodness. And there you have it, my friends. There you have it. And that's what I saw also at the protest that I was at in New York of flood the city of New York, like the Al-Aqsa flood of on October 7th, where people there were telling me they did nothing wrong. It was perfectly legitimate. And we see here now when there's a deal on the table to end the war and to try to sideline Hamas from ruling Gaza and all the destruction that they've brought on Gaza, that some people just can't bring themselves to support such an idea because they like Hamas. They like the fact that there's a group there that's fighting Israel, firing rockets at Israel, kidnapping people, not agreeing to the existence of Israel. And they've been cheering for Hamas all this time to win. They want Hamas to win. They want Israel to lose and Hamas to win. That's what they want. And that's not caring for the people of Gaza. That's not caring for the Palestinians. And also when she says that these terms are unacceptable to Hamas and we need to force Israel's hand on this, Israel has won the war. I don't know if you've noticed. Israel is 1,000 times stronger than Hamas. Every single Hamas leader has been killed, almost every single one. Inside Gaza, outside Gaza. Their patrons, Iran, took a massive hit. Hezbollah took a massive hit. All the allies, or not the allies, all the Arab Muslim countries, as Jonathan said earlier, also support this deal. They've had enough of the mayhem that it's caused, of the destabilization that it's caused. And they've banned the Muslim Brotherhood from their countries. Hamas is the Palestine branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Jordan banned the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt banned the Muslim Brotherhood. UAE, Saudi. They don't want a powerful, winning Hamas with weapons. Nobody wants that. People in Gaza have started to fight Hamas. I don't know if you've noticed, but the clans who are armed, Hamas tried to attack them and they got beaten back. So the only people left who actually support these terrorists are the terror supporters in the US and in Europe, the Abiy Mardins of the world, the Nordin Kiswani, and all these resistance people in marching in London. It's the terrorists in America and in Britain and in Europe. That's what it is. So, yeah, I mean, I do think Jonathan wiped the floor with that nasty terror supporter and Jew hater, Abiy Mardin, who's completely clueless. She just hates Israel. She just wants Israel to lose. She wants Hamas to win. She wants America to put the pressure on Israel and to elevate Hamas, and a bunch of other things that, you know, just a person who is a full-blown terror supporter, Jew hater, who hates also probably her own country, the United States, considering all the support she gives to Venezuela and to Iran. And anyone who's an enemy of America, an enemy of Israel, she loves and adores. Not a woman to be trusted. And I'm glad that Jonathan put her in her place there in that interview. That's it, folks. Insightful Nomad. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.